And we're back to give our NHL season preview with the NHL debuting January 13th, tomorrow, not today. So we're going to go through our top 4 teams of each division who we're predicting will make the playoffs and what order, as well as our picks for the Hart Award, the Art Ross Award, the Calder Award, the Vezina Award, and the Jack Adams Award. Hockey's coming back. Are you ready?
So excited because the Raptors stink right now and I need the Leafs to be good.
And they have quite an interesting opportunity to be good, not just good, but the best Canadian team definitively for at least one season. So shall we jump right in there?
Yeah, it could be a little bit of a spoiler alert, but yeah, let's go get right to it. What do you want to do first?
I'm saying we go right for the Canadian.
All right. The Scotia North Division.
Some people might call it that.
The number one team I have in this division is the Edmonton Oilers.
I'm going Toronto.
Okay. The deep-rooted Leafs fan anxiety and depression and whatever other Leaf ailments I have.
Low self-esteem.
Yeah, prevented me from ever putting this team, no matter what the circumstances, ever number one in any power ranking of anything. I couldn't do it.
Yes.
I couldn't do it. So I had to go with Edmonton because, first of all, McDavid and Draisaitl exist. Like they are the two best players on any team. And Draisaitl won the Hart last year, and McDavid won the year before that, and they continue to consistently average like 1.2 points per game, which is unbelievable. And this Oilers team, which had struggled so long to put the pieces around them, has started to do that. You've got like Kyler Yamamoto will be the big young piece for this team to see how he does kind of on that third line, or they might move him up to the second line, and we'll see what he does. Their young D-core continuing to improve. You got Darnell Nurse, Clefbaum, Ethan Bear, Matt Benning, all under 26 or younger, and physical guys who can move the puck around. And I think when you have those two generational stars in a slightly weaker Canadian division, I think these guys are going to feast. And by way of those two feasting, this Edmonton team's going to do really well, at least in this regular season. So I have them as my number one team.
By slightly weaker, you mean like relative to what Edmonton normally plays in?
Yes.
Huh. Yeah. We'll get into this, but 2 divisions, I had a lot of trouble making my picks, and 2 divisions, not so much. I don't know about you. The Canadian division was one of those. I think 6 out of the 7 teams are as good as any and have a solid shot, and it was really hard to pick 4 out of those 6 for me. Ultimately, I landed on Toronto at number 1. My anxiety and low self-esteem and depression and all that as a Toronto fan would prevent me from ever picking them to win in the playoffs, but they typically do quite well in the regular season most of the time, and I'm just kind of banking on the absolute depth of talent they have to do that. I think just in this COVID season, that's going to be huge for them, that they could lose Mitch Marner and still on paper look like the best team in the league or in the division, whereas any other team, they lose one superstar and it is a drastic hit. The defense worries me, but I think the offensive depth will make up for it, and I'm expecting a contract proving year performance from Freddie Anderson. So I'm going conventional orthodox. The best team on paper is going to be the best team in the division.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads in number 2. I have the Leafs in this prediction, and I just want to say that this is kind of the year that things have to start coming together for this team. They've now had kind of a couple goes at it. Tough first round losses, they didn't even make the playoffs technically last season. And they got to bring it together. The big four, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, are all signed. They're all good to go. There's no contract talks at all in this training camp leading up to the season. So there's no distractions hanging over the team. These guys are ready to go now. And I think they're all going to have a great season. I'm really excited to watch them play. There's more veteran leadership. You got Jumbo, Spezza, Wayne Simmons, Jake Muzzin, all a year older, all guys who have been there. The wild cards for this team that I'm excited to watch is Mikko Lehtinen, who will be paired up with Travis Dermott, it looks like, in that third pair. He looks NHL ready based off the scrimmage, which is, you can't say much about that, but hopefully he provides them with some more reliable 60 minutes as opposed to a Marincin or whoever else you want to throw in there. Alexander Barabanov will be on the fourth line with Spezza and Simmons, so we'll see how he does there. Nick Robertson, will he make the team? Will they burn the beginning of his ELC? We'll see. He's fantastic, and he's an absolute stud. So if he outplays some of these guys, he's got everything working against him. So the fact of him, if he makes a team, it means he is truly special. And so it'd be something nice to look forward to. And then Rasmus Sandin is kind of hovering in that 7th D spot. Will he take the next step and be the guy that everyone's excited for him to be? And those are kind of the 4 wild cards that I'm looking at coming into this season for the Leafs. And I think the biggest thing for this season is Morgan Rielly finally has the best D partner he's ever had in TJ Brody. And he's never really had anything like this. So I'm really hoping that this top pair can be elite because they're going to need to be against some really, really skilled young forwards and McDavid, Draisaitl, Pettersson, Blake Wheeler, Scheifele if he's back. I don't know if he will be. You've got to go up against the young up-and-coming Montreal players. And so they're going to have to rely heavily on those top 2 to really provide them with some big minutes on both ends of the ice. And hopefully they can do that.
Yeah. Number 2, I've got the Calgary Flames. What sealed the deal for me in picking them was signing Jakob Markstrom. I've for a long time felt like Calgary is such an excellent team with the depth and core forwards they have of Monahan, Gaudreau, Bennett, Chukuk, Chukuk. Don't fight me, please. Mark Giordano, an excellent top guy on the blue line. They came really close to making the Stars pay, but the Stars were just the comeback kids all playoffs and had the edge on them. But I think Calgary's gonna thrive. Number 2.
Well, that's perfect. I have them number 3. And you mentioned my 2 biggest points. Markstrom, if he replicates what he did last season, going to be really big for them because that's always been their biggest question mark is goaltending. The forwards core are another year older, another year wiser. Matt Tkachuk is an awesome rat, and you hate to play against him, so he'll be kind of the Brad Marchand for the division this season. He's awesome, and I hate playing against him, but he's fun to watch. And I guess the biggest thing that I can say for this team is they had that whole Bill Peters situation kind of sit over them before the shutdown with the racial remarks and Akil Thomas. And really important is it really like sparked the talk about racial inequity in hockey even before all the things that happened in the summer. And a situation like that is going to wear on a team because he was fired. And are we frozen?
No.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Because he was fired, and now they get a clean slate moving into this season. And I expect them to play really well all season. They won't have the distraction. And yeah, this is an exciting team on paper, and I look forward to watching them. I have them 3.
For my 3, I've got the Vancouver Canucks. Just a team that's, after going through a small rebuild, coming into its own more and more. I think in many ways, the playoffs last year and the incredible fight they put up against the Vegas Golden Knights was a bit of a coming out party for them. Having Pedersen has stepped into the true elite of the forwards in the league last year. Yeah, you're putting me a little to shame with the level of depth you've got on your research. I did not quite go as deep, but and the Canadian division especially was so tight that a lot of it was, or a little of it was gut feeling, but how they performed in the playoffs last year was a huge part of my decisions for this. I think it's been the perfect amount of space between the end of the playoffs and the resumption of the season, where due to COVID and everything, they haven't had like a beers and hot dogs type of off season, but it's been long enough that the wear and tear and should be fully healed, and it's a short enough season that they can go full steam ahead. So Vancouver jumps to number 3 based off postseason excellence and my expectations of a continuation on that.
Okay, so that was where we first differ. I have in number 4 Montreal, so Vancouver is not in my top 4, and I went with Les Habitants because they are a team that made some great moves in the offseason and look to be built to kind of play in these type of conditions. Some young studs. Drouin, despite all the craziness he's been through at the beginning of his career, he's only 25. You've got Coquette Niemi, who's 20, so young, and already entering his 3rd season. And you've got Nick Suzuki, who's 21 and played really well last season. He's going to provide them with some depth. Tyler Toffoli was a great signing. So this is a big reason why I picked Montreal over Vancouver, is because the Canucks lost him and the Canadians gained him. And a wild card for this team will be Josh Anderson, because they put a lot of money into this guy, and he's coming back from injury with a long-term contract, and no one knows how he's going to perform. So it'll be interesting to watch. But the number one reason why I have Montreal 4th is because they invest in signing Jake Allen as a really good 1B for Carey Price, who's going to get the rest he needs during the regular season in order to perform in the playoffs. And if they need Carey Price, they can roll with him a little bit more. But if they lose him, they have a solid backup, which they haven't had in a while. And so if they're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be because of Carey Price splitting the workload with a goaltender who's now very serviceable as a backup. And so I had the Canadians number 4.
Yeah, I agree with you completely that the Canadians have the best goaltending tandem, possibly in the league, definitely in the division. My number 4 pick is Edmonton. I guess I'll prelude this by saying the big question for me, which I still don't know the answer to, is what is going to be the style of play we see emerge in this division, and then who does that favor? And it was a question between kind of like grit and playoff style, like don't give an inch hockey, versus skill and speed. Ultimately, I think my picks reflect that I went with skill and speed. So the Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, Monahan, Gaudreau, um, I guess Chikuk is a bit of both, but uh, Pedersen and then obviously Draisaitl and McDavid. But at the same time, I think depth-wise, Edmonton is going to suffer from having those two top forwards, but then a lot less to support. Their goaltending has more question marks, and I expect them, McDavid and Draisaitl, to both put up Herculean efforts that are going to be good enough to bring the team into the playoffs, but not enough to be at the top of the division consistently when they have their off nights, when the other team are just checking them right, which there will be plenty of, even if I do think ultimately like skill and speed will emerge victorious in this division. So that's why I've got them number 4. I'll say quickly, like 5 and 6, I'd look at Winnipeg and Montreal as much more gritty, grindy style teams moving in. And I think I also looked at the Laine contract situation and kind of see that hanging over Winnipeg's head a little, just based on like the way media day interviews have gone and where the focus has been. So if I had to have one storyline or takeaway, it's going to be that this format of letting the teams play each other just again and again and again in a closed season, we're really going to see, I'm thinking and hoping, like a high scoring hockey clinic, and the teams who have the best players to do that and the most depth to do that are going to emerge victorious. And those 4 are the Leafs, the Flames, the Canucks, and the Oilers.
Okay. Patrick Laine for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Who says no? Out of the two teams, do you think Columbus or Winnipeg would say no?
If I'm Winnipeg, I'm starting to wonder, like, shit, do we just get this problem off our hands before it snowballs into a bigger problem? And at least in Dubois, you're getting someone on paper who can sort of fill that hole, if not completely, enough that you didn't lose a generational talent for nothing. If I'm Columbus, I'm concerned because I don't really see Laine fitting into Tortorella's style of play, and I don't really have any guarantee that Laine would actually want to sit and play on Columbus. So Columbus says no.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is actually really, really, really good and is going to be really, really, really good. And despite the unrest he has currently with Columbus, I think he's too valuable of an asset to move, and I actually value him probably higher than Laine, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Like
Shall we? Oh, sorry.
I'll just say I see Laine as having a higher ceiling than Dubois, but you don't trade for the player with the high ceiling at a time when you're absolutely unconvinced they can actually meet that ceiling, unless you have some incentive that makes you think it can. And I don't see that on Columbus. A team like Pittsburgh or the Capitals, I can totally see them taking a risk on a guy like Laine, but not Columbus.
Shall we move on? What division would you like to do next?
Let's get the hard ones out of the way. So for me, I don't know if you can predict this, but that was the Central.
Tough to pick. Yeah, for sure. So my number one team in this division, I don't think there's really. Well, we'll see. You're kind of a little bit of a homer on that side, but I have the Tampa Bay Lightning number one.
Same.
They have lost Kucherov for the season, which is huge. I don't know if Stamkos will be back, but this team is so deep, it's so talented, and the goaltending is fantastic. They won the Stanley Cup without their captain last season, and were obviously the best team there in the bubble. And I think they're going to roll. This division looks to be a little bit top heavy, with kind of the top 3 teams, in my opinion, and the other 4 a little bit weaker. So I think Tampa Bay is going to roll against the bottom half of this division and get continue to be excellent, and they'll be my number one pick. I actually think this Central Division is weaker than the I guess the Atlantic Division that Tampa Bay has been in previous years.
Huh. I think this division has a lot of potential to be very stacked and very competitive. And if I had to pick like the deepest division, it might actually have been this one or the Canadian. I do think Tampa is absolutely the best team in the league right now, though, with like the scariest top six you can have probably. I'm pretty sure Stamkos is going to be back for the start of the season. So, I mean, he doesn't fully replace Kucherov, but nothing to complain about. And Victor Hedman, probably the best defenseman in the league. Andrei Vasilevsky, perennial Vezina candidate at this point. So, and everything I said in my last segment holds true or even more true about the continuation of bubble play into what's going to happen. So, there's no choice other than the Tampa Bay Lightning for me. It might get a little more interesting at number 2 and down, though.
On that note, I kept consistent with your bubble theory. I have the Dallas Stars as my number 2 team. Similar to the Lightning, they were the second best team in the bubble and beat a heavily favored Vegas side in the conference final. They're deep. They've got the top end talent that I think are a little bit underrated in Seguin and Ben. The goaltending tandem was deceptively fantastic for them last season, and hopefully they can continue to get some solid goaltending. I feel like that might take a step back, and that's where they struggle. But their defensive core is unbelievable with Klingberg at the helm there. And I think this division is a little bit weaker on the bottom end, so I see Dallas taking advantage of that, and I have them in the number 2 spot.
I've got the Carolina Hurricanes to my chagrin. Maybe it's the same as you not being able to pick the Leafs number 1, but I do want to keep my expectations a little low for Dallas, just out of not wanting to get too hopeful and too optimistic. I'll go into the Dallas preview. I do have them in my top 4, but for Carolina, kind of I see them as being 1 or 2 years ahead of where I put the Vancouver Canucks, a team that went through the rebuild, acquired the right pieces, and have now watched them mature and come into their own. I thought they played great hockey in the bubble. I think Svechnikov and Aho are like top talents in the league. I think the system they've built there is going to be really beneficial to their bubble play. And just looking at the momentum they've accrued over the last couple of years, I've got them number 2 in this division.
Absolutely. Some emotional hedging going on here with Dallas, but
Yes.
I have Carolina in my 3 spot. And just like all the things you just touched on, this team, we've been waiting for them for a couple years to have a breakthrough with all the talent that they have. Their decor is so good. They lost Justin Falk to the Blues last season, and they're still really solid on the blue line. And Jacob Slavin, I think, is the most underrated defenseman in the NHL and definitely was in the Norris conversation last season. He's fantastic on both ends. And the only thing holding back this Hurricanes team, I believe, is goaltending. And look for them to be in the market for any team that gets out to a slow start who has a solid goalie. Look for them to take a bet because Reimer, Mrazek, whoever is in the net for them this season, I think they need to go one step higher in order for them to have a shot to make it all the way to the Cup Finals. So yeah, Carolina 3. What you got?
I've got Dallas 3. Again, I did hedge my bets. I take back what I said. I think Ben Bishop and Anton Hudobin is the best goaltending tandem in the league right now, not Carey Price, Jake Allen. So you love that. You love the steps Miro Heikkinen took forward. You love John Klingberg as an excellent offensive defensemen. You love the top line of Seguin, Ben, Radulov. Seguin is going to miss the start of the season, but he's had surgery and recovering from extensive wear and tear that he had to play through all playoffs, which is why you didn't see him at his peak. So I expect a healthier, better version with a chip on his shoulder about not being able to provide as much as he'd like for this team. And you love the up and coming talent you saw in the forward core who stepped up to plate when the Dallas top line couldn't. They have their struggles, and that's why I'm not picking them higher, such as the round robin at the start of the bubble. What typically happens in a Dallas season is they have a rocky road, some bumps before they get it together and start playing like a top team in the league. And I just expect that with less games to make up for it. So I've got them at number 3.
Okay. So we've got our same top 3, but I think we may differ here at 4.
I went with a bit of an out on Olympic, so I'd expect it.
Okay, so did I. So let's see. I went with the Florida Panthers at
Okay, I
number
went
4.
with the Nashville Predators.
Okay. So I think Barkov is immensely underrated. He's a fantastic two-way forward. Should always be in the Selke conversation. He's great. They lose Hoffman, but they replace him with Anthony Duclair, who's cheaper and can provide you with that same goal-scoring thump. And Mackenzie Weegar and Aaron Ekblad are a fantastic young pair of studs on their blue line, which will be really important. And I actually had a tough time picking the top 4, because just I thought the weaker teams in this division were Nashville, Detroit, Columbus, Chicago, and then Florida just stood out because I think Bobrovsky, he kind of has a off and an on season, and he's in line for an on season because last year he had an off season. So when he's on, he's a Vezina candidate, and so if he does that, and I guess why not? It's predictions, nothing can hurt me. So Bobrovsky, he's gonna be in the Vezina conversation. He's gonna have a great bounce back year. This might be his last great year. But yeah, I see him in the Vezina conversation, and that's what's going to drive the Panthers to the 4th seed in this Central Division.
See, I don't see it as weak at all. I guess Chicago's a question mark with Taves out. But I see Columbus, Florida for the reasons you just gave, Nashville as all like potential teams to have an excellent season who are just, like you said, kind of off mode and on mode. And I see Nashville as being in the right position to flip that switch back on. They have a lot of the same pieces they had in their cup run again a couple years back. They've still got the goaltending. They've still got an excellent defensive core. Philip Forsberg is going to be back healthy. So it was a bit of a gut pick. They're not much of a different team from the team that did not perform very well last year, but they absolutely have the potential to be, and for no reason other than just sensing and predicting a change of momentum, I think Nashville's going to come out on top. Kind of interesting that neither of us picked Columbus after the thrashing they gave our Leafs.
Yeah, they're gonna. It's kind of like the Orlando Magic in my NBA preview. They've got a solid coach and a solid system, and they're gonna continue to eke out wins. But I just think, especially if Dubois is unhappy, he's their best player, and they're gonna feel the ramifications of losing Bobrovsky and Panarin at some point, right? And why can't it be this season? So I see them kind of on that periphery, and they have a shot because I think you could really slot any of those kind of 5 teams into the 4th slot. But yeah, I didn't pick them just because of the Dubois situation.
Just a little bit of resentment on my part. And yeah, I mean, I called it a thrashing. It wasn't a thrashing they gave the Leafs. It was a frustratingly close, tight check-in performance, and we'll see. Maybe they can keep up that style for 56 games, but I think this is a pretty talent-rich division, and I think they're going to falter against the offensive, like guns blazing Tampa, Carolina, Dallas, and we'll see if they can eke out enough against Nashville, Florida, Chicago, but I'm not convinced, especially the goaltending question marks. You can get greatness from relatively unknown goalies, but the rule is you typically don't, and we'll see.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the division I have as the toughest, in my opinion. I think it's really strong top to bottom, and that would be the Mass Mutual East Division. A bunch of Stanley Cup contenders fell into this division, and it was really, really tough for me to pick a top four. I have probably a big surprise missing out on the playoffs, but I will lead into this by going with my number one team in this division, the Philadelphia Flyers.
Got the Boston Bruins.
So I chose the Flyers because of a little bit based on your theory of kind of bubble play. They had great chemistry near the end of the NHL season before the shutdown. They were buzzing on all cylinders. Fantastic team. They play really, really physically, and you've got a ton of pests that get under your skin, and they're the team that you hate to play against. And they all have each other's backs, and they've been playing really well. And I think Carter Hart's can take the step forward and kind of become the premier goalie in the National Hockey League. And if he can do that, then this Philadelphia team is just going to continue to roll. And that's why I have, out of all of the great teams in this division, I think they're the toughest to play against. And that's why I have them number one.
Yeah. I think, losing Rask was huge for the Bruins in the bubble. He was in the Vezina candidates last year, and I'm expecting a return to form for him when he comes in. This Boston team is just so professional in what that they always manage to get done, always manage to be a top contender, always manage to play at an elite high level. And I think that kind of system is going to really pay off in this division. I mean, I think we have a bit of signaling of the old guard passing with Chara stepping on. There's going to be more emphasis on the younger players in the defensive core, but Pasternak is an example of a player who's successfully taken the torch, but you still get amazing performance and production out of Bergeron, Marchand. So team that played great last year, had a Vezina candidate in Tuukka Rask, had the Jack Adams winner in Bruce Cassidy. I expect the original six, high elite top performance to show through.
Okay. Number two, I have the New York Islanders.
Wow.
And that is because this team feels, and I don't know, it's a weird comparison, but it kind of feels like the Toronto Raptors, where they consistently have outperformed everyone's expectations of them. They've consistently been placed low, especially after losing Tavares. And this team, kind of like Columbus, they're a better version of Columbus. They play an excellent system. Barry Trotz has won the Jack Adams like 2 times in the last, 5 years. And he is a great coach. And this team continues to find diamonds in the metaphorical goaltending rough. So I expect them to have solid goaltending this season and great system that promotes defense and counterattacks. And they just locked up Matthew Barzal for 3 years, $21 million, which is an absolute steal for a guy who runs their entire offense. And yeah, this team's just going to continue to roll, right? I'm already taking a big hit on my Raptors pick that I had them overachieving this season, but I truly think that the Islanders will overachieve what most people have them as, and that's why I got them number 2.
I've got the Philadelphia Flyers at number 2 for pretty much all the reasons you listed. Just a team that's been up and down throughout the past 10 years, but when they've been up, they've been great. And when they've been down, they've done great in the draft. And it's all, I mean, we'll see where their next step continues in that trend. If they manage to take their game to that next level to be because they haven't broken through yet to being one of those like true elite level teams, the way I just described Boston, the way Tampa is, the way Dallas looked last year for parts. So we'll see if they manage, if this is the year, but offensive talent's there, goaltending's there, defensive presence is there. So you like everything you see from Philly. They absolutely have the ceiling to be the number 1 team. I'm going with Boston over them, but Philly number 2.
Okay. Well, I have the Boston Bruins number 3. The reason I have them sliding is because they lose both Torrey Krug and Zdeno Chara, which is their top pair. And so even though they lose those two, they have younger D who are ready to take on a bigger role. You've got McAvoy, Griezlick, Carlo, who are all solid and can take more minutes in this Boston D core, but they're gonna have to be carried this season by Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak. That line was the best line in the league last year, because it stayed healthy and produced the most. And they're gonna need that again because again, this division's really tough. You have a really good team missing the playoffs based on this top 4 projection, and in my projection, it's not going to be Boston. They're number 3.
All right. My number 3 is the Washington Capitals. Again, this Metropolitan Division is kind of like the long-standing Titans with Boston. Washington is another one Boston comes from the Atlantic Division, but Washington is just one of those teams that has been at the top for a long time. I'm picking them, just expecting them to continue to perform at the top. I think Ovi is going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, a little bit of urgency in his game, as like speculations coming to whether he can break Gretzky's record. This is going to be a very competitive division in the top 4, top 5. And I think the cultures that each respective team has is going to be a huge part. And I think winning that cup brought breaking their playoff curse against the Penguins brought the Capitals culture to a place it needs to be for Washington to have a good enough season in a tight division.
Well, that is why, and I wavered on kind of 2 rivals here, but I went Washington at 4, which means Pittsburgh's missing the playoffs. Sorry, Sid. But I have the Capitals here. I think they're the better overall team versus Pittsburgh. The biggest question I have is how is Ilya Samsonov going to perform in the net, replacing Holtby? And I think Holtby was a little bit past his prime at this point, and Samsonov is going to step in this role, and people have high expectations for him. So I imagine him to be solid. He's got a decent team in front of him. And yeah, like you said, the culture of winning, Washington's going to continue to do that. And Ovi's only got so many more shots at the cup. And so this is as good a year as any to do that. So that's why I have them 4. That means that Pittsburgh, New York, Buffalo are all missing out. And it's tough. This division's really deep.
Yeah. My number 4, I do have Pittsburgh, which means I'm overlooking the Islanders. Just tried and true over the upstart underdog above expectations. I guess I'm going against my own logic, but if I'm Pittsburgh, I have such a chip on my shoulder over the round robin. or the qualifying best of 5 they put out against the Canadians. I will just never look down on Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin until they give me solid reason to, and in my opinion, they have yet to do so. Tried and true over the upstart, the New Jersey Devils would have been my sleeper pick for this division, but I think this one is really interesting with those 4 teams who I think are ostentatiously at the top, with teams like the Islanders and the Devils who are going to be looking to make an upset, and teams like Buffalo who probably feel like their time is now. The Rangers probably nothing to lose type season. Let's start one step at a time. But with that makeup of the Titans, the underdogs, and the looking to start becoming an excellent team, I'm banking on the Titans, and that's why I have the 4 teams that I do.
Awesome. We will finish up the playoff picks with the Honda West Division. And at the top of this division, I have the Colorado Avalanche.
I've got the St. Louis Blues.
Okay. Colorado right now is my pick to win it all. This team is sick. It's filthy. It's full of studs. McKinnon, Landeskog, Rantanen probably is the best line in the league. They had some injuries last year, but all 3 of them are just disgusting, and they're so good. And their decor is young and deep. You've got Cole, Sam Girard, Eric Johnson, Cale Makar, Devin Taves was a great pickup, and Bowen Byram looks to be NHL ready, coming off of a great World Juniors campaign. This team is sick. I can't say it enough. The goaltending, they've had solid tandem with Grubauer and Francouz, which aren't 2 household names, but they've been really solid for them, especially with this great decor. And and we'll get into it with awards, but Colorado, for me, I'm super excited to see what they do.
Yeah, on paper, this looked like the weakest division to me. So it was kind of a question for me of just who's going to pick up the wins and play the most consistent, best hockey. And my pick for that was the St. Louis Blues. I think the signing of Hoffman kind of clinched it for me. I think that's going to be a terrifying top 6. However they pair it up. They had their coming out party winning the cup as an excellent team in the league, and they have continued on that. They had a great regular season last year. I just think they are a very solid team that will do all the right things in every game and just put up an excellent regular season record.
Number 2, I have the Vegas Golden Knights. There's not much to say about this team. They just have been around now for 3 seasons, and they just win. And it's a great system that they have. Pete DeBoer stepped in and has continued their winning culture. And then they get Alex Pietrangelo, right? They add him to the mix, which is a top 5 defenseman in this league. And so their team is only going to get better. I think personally, Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner are the best tandem in the NHL. That can be debated with Dallas and Montreal and wherever else, but I think they're great goaltending duo, and that's going to lead to a lot of success for this Vegas team. And not much to say about them. They're just solid, and they're going to win, and that's why I have them number 2.
My number 2, I've got Colorado for all the reasons you outlined, pretty much. I guess I saw enough inconsistencies in their playoff season against Dallas that I can kind of see them just faltering in a couple places and not picking up all the easy wins that I predict the St. Louis Blues success has cemented. I just don't think they have that. It's not a question of ceiling, it's a question of foundations and base. I see Colorado's as a little weaker, even though they are a terrifying team, but number 2.
Yeah. I think we have a same top 3 or the same top 3 teams. I have St. Louis 3. based on the things you said. The top three in this division are all deep. And then, like you said, I think the bottom half of this division is really weak. It feels to me kind of like the Central Division. They lose Pietrangelo, the Blues, which is a big loss, but they do get Torrey Krug, which is an awesome signing to replace some of that. And they got Justin Falk last season as kind of their contingency plan if Pietrangelo did leave. So this decor stays solid. They re-up Vince Dunn on a 1-year deal just to keep afloat before hopefully the salary cap jumps next season, which was a great signing for them. And like you said, Hoffman for cheap, which is going to help replace Tarasenko because he's going to be out for quite a bit of time, which is a huge loss for them. Hopefully they get him back for a late playoff run. And when they get him back, they're going to be truly devastating team and tough to stop. And that's why I got them 3. All 3 of these teams are kind of interchangeable at the top.
Yeah, I've got Vegas at number 3. I don't know what Vegas did. I really, for my life, cannot figure out how Vegas has been so dang successful. And I kind of always pick against them and never expect them to do the best just because I don't understand it. So I have them as the worst of the best. They absolutely have firmly placed their feet into that circle of elite teams that will make a deep playoff run. So you can't, especially in this division, which I view as relatively the weakest, you can't pick them not to be in that top 3. But I'm just kind of always holding my breath, waiting for the Golden Knights to falter or like not take the step, continue the step forward that we've come to expect. So number 3.
I would love to take a deep dive in for like an off-season podcast because I actually did a case on the Vegas Golden Knights in one of my classes at school, and it talked about a bunch of different factors that kind of has led to their success, and they've taken a really great analytical approach to it as well. So it's definitely something we can talk about later on, and I'd love to dive into that because there's a lot of interesting things surrounding this team that we may not see similar success in Seattle. All right.
A guy whose dad is one of their scouts, so maybe try and set up a guest.
Ooh, that would be unreal. I went out on a limb here for my number 4 pick because you could kind of pick from anywhere in here. But I went with the Minnesota Wild as my number 4 team, which I think a lot of people are going to scratch their heads and throw their hands up in the air on this one.
I've got the Anaheim Ducks.
Okay. So with Minnesota, I think that the only reason why I picked this team was they had a great vibe near the end of the season before the shutdown. They were playing really well and they were starting to click as a team and figure out all the pieces. And they had some issues with the general manager there that have now been resolved. And I think that was hanging over the organization a bit. And this is a team and a city that expects winning. It's a great hockey market. And I think they're going to do just that. I think they're going to kind of find their identity and be able to sneak into a 4th playoff spot in a relatively weak division. They do have a really solid decor in Jared Spurgeon, Ryan Suter, Jonas Brodin, Matt Dumba. Any of those guys could be on the trade block, and that might affect my pick. But if they keep them all, then they'd definitely be good to go. And I think they need a goalie to kind of round out this team and probably some more scoring oomph. But the goalie is a big piece for me. And also yesterday I found out that Marco Rossi is going to be injured. That was their 1st-round pick last year. And so that's a big loss, but I still have faith in the Minnesota Wild. So that's my pick for number 4.
Yeah. You've put me a little to shame. My reasoning's not quite so deep. I'm picking Jamie Drysdale and Trevor Zegras to help light the torch for this team. It's absolutely like a post-World Junior effect, but those two they just made such an impact for their respective teams and were able to carry them forward and be leaders. I think adding that to the offense and the defense of this team will shore up enough that in, like I said, a relatively weak division, I think they'll be able to make an impact and add enough to this already, I guess, I don't know if decent's the right word, but I don't see them as worse and any of the bottom non-top three teams. So I think those two will make enough of a difference to carry them above the pack.
And they also probably have the best goaltender out of those teams. Unless you could kind of argue John Gibson and Darcy Kemper, but they have solid goaltending, right? Which could mean something in that final spot.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take one more last break and wrap up with our award picks. See you soon. And we're back to wrap up with our award predictions, starting with the Hart Trophy. The top 5 frontrunners right now in the gambling world are Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, Austin Matthews, Leon Draisaitl, and Artemi Panarin. I have picked Nathan MacKinnon as my Hart Trophy winner for this season.
I have picked Connor McDavid, who, spoiler alert, I've also picked for the Art Ross.
Okay. I picked MacKinnon because I'm really high on this Colorado team, and I honestly think he should have won last year. But he is a stud. He's still only 25, just entering the prime of his career. He does everything for this team. And I think they're going to have a little bit more regular season success, which is going to lead to him winning the award. Good value pick. I don't know. Mitch Marner is plus 2130 if you want to look into that. But I think Matthews is going to have a 6 season, so that'll kind of put a damper on Marner's chances.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I'm doing picks for awards, like I just consider depth and opportunity. And the Colorado team, much like Toronto, is just so deep. I guess less so in the forwards, but I think success is going to come from many avenues for them. Whereas for this Edmonton team, success can only really come from McDavid or Draisaitl.
Yeah.
And so, like I said in my Canadian division preview, I'm expecting a Herculean effort from both. And I think for Edmonton to do well, which I think they will, it's just going to require such high level point production from McDavid that I think he gives no choice but to choose him.
Yeah. You can see where the NHL is trending because the Art Ross top favorites are the exact 5 same players, with just Draisaitl, Panarin, and Matthews kind of flip-flopping in order for the Art Ross in terms of odds. But yeah, same 5 guys, meaning that scoring is valued in the NHL as it should be. And you pick McDavid. I have Leon Draisaitl. Not much more to say. You lined the case out very well. These two will be getting a lot of points, and that's why they're kind of the top 2 guys.
I do kind of wish we had more opportunity to consider defensemen, because I think Victor Hedstrom makes a very strong case for most valuable player. Just the contribution he gives is not recognized. But I mean, you think defensemen play more minutes than in the league. The responsibilities they have are different, but harder to replace. So if the league was different, I would feel strongly about giving it to him, but just based on trends, it's not going to happen. So
Okay, moving on to the Calder Award. The favorites for this award are Igor Shesterkin, the goalie for the New York Rangers, Alexis Lafreniere, also on the Rangers, Kaprizov, Tim Stützle, and Norris. And Kaprizov and Norris, I got nothing, but I know the other 3. I picked Alexis Lafreniere. I think he's a stud, and yeah, it's hard to pick against the number 1 pick.
yeah, I also went with Lafreniere. It was between him and Stützle for me. I think both are going to have a ton of opportunity. It just I guess some hometown Canadian bias watching what Lafreniere was able to do for Team Canada last year in the World Juniors gives I guess, a little more experience to him and a little bit of bias to me. So I picked him over Stuzel.
And if he's playing with Panarin, then those guys are going to rack up a ton of points. Okay. Nice little value bet. Trevor Zegras is plus 1,600, the stud from U.S. hockey. Okay. The Vezina Trophy. The favorites for this award are Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Price, Hart, and Markstrom. But I went outside of the favorites, and I went with my value pick on this one. I actually decided to do it, and I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going Sergei Bobrovsky at plus 1,850 for my Vezina winner.
I'm going Vasilevsky.
Okay. The front runner himself. Understandable. Tampa's going to win a ton of games. I'm just going Bobrovsky purely off of a pattern, and this one might get thrown back in my face in a big way, but hey, then them's the odds, right? We will finish up with the Jack Adams Award. The favorites are Barry Trotz, Jared Bednar, Rick Bowness, Peter DeBoer, and Craig Berube. And I have picked Jared Bednar, head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, as my Jack Adams winner.
I've picked Craig Berube, of the St. Louis Blues. So we both think it's going to be in the number one team in the same division.
Yeah. And yeah, I had Colorado all over my awards. So no surprise there.
Yeah, like I said, I think this is the weakest division. So I think the winner, I can very much see the argument you made for Colorado holding true and them being the number one team over St. Louis. But I think this division is the one where a team has the best opportunity to put together the most impressive record. And it's not really going to be about any specific coaching adjustments or decisions. There's so many excellent coaches in the NHL that it's more about working with what you have and what environment you're in. And I think St. Louis has enough and has the right environment to put together the best record this season.
All right. 2 dark horse candidates for me. Alain Vigneault is plus 1,200 of the Rangers. They could have a decent season. People expect them to take a step forward. And then unlisted on the odds site that I was on was Evanson of the Minnesota Wild, the team who I picked for that 4th playoff spot in the West. So I think if they get in, he has a shot to win it. And I had never heard of him before, but hey, might be good to sprinkle a little bit there. Yeah.